One of the most common things that I get asked a lot is how to do script lettering on chalkboards, and the answer to that is faux calligraphy. Hey guys, it's Nathaniel, and this week I invited Joyce from Artsynibs Studio to help me discuss everything you need to know about faux calligraphy, aka script lettering. I've known Joyce since 2014, and I'd like for you to meet her and get to know her more.
Hi, I'm Joyce, but most people know me by my pen name, Artsynibs. I'm a full-time calligrapher, and I started my journey 5 years ago in Manchester. My work is mainly found in companies, like creating handwritten elements for them or demonstrating their products at international trade fairs like Creative World Frankfurt or the London Stationery Show. But when I'm not working on corporate projects, I teach. I teach modern calligraphy courses. So over the years, I'm really lucky that these courses have taken me to many different cities in Europe, where I used to live, and now back here in Singapore.
Hey Joyce, how are you? I'm so glad that you agreed to be here and share what you know about modern calligraphy and faux calligraphy.
It's great that I can be doing this video with you on a different platform. So that's thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited because I've wanted to have this discussion with you for the longest time because I know you're an expert in this field. I'm sure a lot of people are interested to know more about what faux calligraphy is and how they can apply it to their work. So yeah, before we dive into faux calligraphy, can you tell me more about what calligraphy is?
Well, essentially, calligraphy is the art of beautiful writing. But to try to explain what calligraphy is, it'll take some time because it's a very big umbrella. You know, it's an art form, you know, with many different styles, just like painting, right? There are many different styles of painting. So when we talk about faux calligraphy today, I want to zoom in straight, you know, into modern calligraphy, which is what we see a lot today on Pinterest, on Instagram. So, well, I practice pointed pen calligraphy. So it's a lot more swirly, you know, a lot more cursive, to put it that way. Maybe some of the calligraphy scripts that most of us are slightly more familiar with would be the copperplate script or Spencerian script. And a lot of us who practice modern calligraphy have actually used these two traditional scripts to inspire our own styles. That is the wing of calligraphy that we are looking at today when we talk about faux calligraphy.
I feel like faux calligraphy falls more under lettering than calligraphy because when you define lettering, lettering is really the art of drawing the letters. Yeah, whether it's beautiful or not, it's the art of drawing the letters. When you compare with calligraphy, it's the art of beautiful writing. So those two, in essence, are very different because one, you would focus on the movement of the hands on paper or on the surface that you're writing, while on the other hand, is you're focusing more on the structure and how it will look like in the end. So it doesn't matter if you create multiple strokes with lettering because at the end of the day, the finished product is what you call lettering. Have you ever needed to use faux calligraphy over calligraphy in your projects?
Quite a lot, actually. Essentially, projects that are not done on calligraphy-friendly paper that would require me to employ faux calligraphy, even for, say, my engraving projects, because to create that thick and thin character in your calligraphy, you need a nib, right? The nib is it flexes, it opens up, and it creates a thick line. But say for an example, when I'm using an engraver, the drill bit, you know, it doesn't flex, it doesn't split. I have to look into faux calligraphy to achieve that same script effect.
It's interesting you mentioned engraving. I've always wanted to try that too.
It's actually quite fun, but you probably need a magnifying glass.
Is there any other application for faux calligraphy?
Write on glass, or when you write on a chalkboard, like what you do, right? What you specialize in, essentially on any surface that the nib can't work on.
Yeah, so you would say that calligraphy is really dependent on the tool itself.
I think it's worth mentioning that you can still do those sort of like a squarish form of calligraphy, like italic or Gothic, because you get markers in the chisel tip
Mm.
form, right? But you don't get markers with, a tip that actually flexes, right?
That's an interesting
Yeah.
thought. Now that we have set the tone, like we already know what calligraphy is, what lettering is,
Mm.
and what we feel folk calligraphy falls under, let's dive deeper into folk calligraphy. What
Mm.
tools do you need to create folk calligraphy?
Anything really. I work with a pencil a lot. So essentially what I would do is a pencil, a ballpoint, your marker, anything that's suitable for the surface that you're working on.
Similar for me. I mean,
Yeah.
I think you can use
Mm.
any kind of tool to create folk calligraphy.
Mm.
For me, mostly I do
Yeah.
chalk lettering, right? So I use
Mm.
pen, pencil, and chalk most of the time, whether it's dry or liquid. But I suppose you can
Yeah,
still
yeah.
use the pointed nib to do folk calligraphy too, right? If you really wanted to.
Yeah,
You really
but it's
wanted
sort of
to
like extra
hurt my
work lah. Yeah.
Why would you do that?
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway, I'm
I
just
know,
playing
yeah.
around. I'm playing around.
Yeah. But I mean, if you think about it, you can literally use anything. So say for an example, you're at the beach, when you can go to the beach, and you want to write something on the sand, and you can do faux calligraphy with that twig, anything, even your finger in snow, if you live in a country that snows. Mhm.
Yeah, oh my God, I miss traveling.
Yeah.
Thanks for reminding
Yeah.
me we're in lockdown. When you look at it calligraphy wise, right, you have a lot of different scripts that you can do.
Mm.
Traditional calligraphy, modern calligraphy. What type of script does folk calligraphy apply to?
Like I mentioned earlier, at the copper plate, which inspires a lot of modern calligraphy, essentially anything that is quite cursive. Even for some people who actually learned cursive in school, you can also, create folk calligraphy with that sort of writing style. I specialize mainly in the more cursive sort of style. That is what I default to.
For me, most of what I do on chalk is lettering per se, even though it looks
Mm,
like calligraphy, because
mm,
usually for chalkboards, I work with bigger surfaces and it's really hard to find a
mm.
tool, especially chalk,
Yeah,
that can be very big
yeah,
in size, where you can just do
yeah,
everything in one stroke, beautiful writing. So I have to
yeah.
draw everything from the outlines and then just fill the shapes in. I
Mm-hmm.
usually default to similar to a modern or a brush
Yeah.
calligraphy style of script, mainly
Mm,
because that's my background. So I'm comfortable doing
mm.
those kinds of scripts. And most of the time when I have client work, they also prefer the elegant type of scripts. And so I
Yeah.
usually follow those modern or copper plate style scripts more.
So I guess like we can agree that, for both of us at least use faux calligraphy for a more cursive style.
Most, if not all, of the chalkboards that I do are lettering or fall calligraphy, unless it is monoline. I rarely do
Mm.
monoline because for commercial chalkboards, they need to be
Be too
visible from
thin.
far away. Can you imagine
Yeah.
doing a one line of calligraphy on a chalkboard that you expect to see like 50 meters away?
I
That's
know. Oh,
so
that'll be so
even if I
tough.
do monoline, I will still have to default to fall calligraphy. I will have to thicken the monoline,
Yeah.
make it
Yeah.
chunkier, and be able to be
Yeah.
more visible from afar. So it's
Mm-hmm.
also very difficult to find a huge enough chalk to work with. I mean, if you're doing
Yeah.
liquid chalk, maybe you can use a paintbrush or
Yeah.
a bigger type of liquid marker. Some comes in this size, which is
Yeah.
quite big.
Chalks are all like tiny, right?
Yeah.
They're like
So
really tiny.
So most of the time, most of my projects, I really need to just do the outline and fill the shapes in.
Mm.
So Joyce, can you tell me more about your process? How do you approach doing fall calligraphy project? Maybe you want a very simple one, a simple banner for your friend's birthday. How would you go about it?
First thing for me is to figure out how I want to place my text. It could be in a line, or it could be in different rows, or happy on top, birthday below. Once I have decided on that, start to sketch it out. So after sketching it out, usually I do it with a pencil or a marker. So once you sketch it out, then I always tell people to be aware of the movement of your hand, because this is one thing that we don't often do when we are writing, because we scribble really fast, right? So it's very important that you maintain awareness of the direction that you're moving in, so you can pick out the downstrokes, right? Because once you pick out the downstrokes, it will be really, really helpful for step 3, right? Which is reinforcing the downstrokes. Where you have to thicken those lines. There is like a rule to that, right? Which most of us abide by, which is you thicken the downstroke. So when we look at the part where we are reinforcing those downstrokes, basically just drawing a second line next to your downstroke. And then step 4 will be deciding whether you want to color in that space to thicken a line, or you can leave it blank. And this in itself is a design, right? So usually I follow 4 steps. So which is you write down the word, you work out your downstrokes, you reinforce the downstrokes, and then you decide whether you want to shade it in or not.
I feel like that is really the basics of folk calligraphy, is understanding how you write letters and words in calligraphy and then converting it into something that you can draw later on. So by understanding how you write it in calligraphy, you normally would understand where the upstrokes are or where the downstrokes are, and naturally you'll be able to figure out how to shade them.
Yeah. Definitely.
Interesting question I have here is, how do you thicken the stroke? Is there a science behind it, or is it purely like on a whim?
You need to measure it.
I have the word hello written in a monoline, right? Then how do you decide where to put the thick strokes?
Usually I will thicken the left side, but I would also take into consideration the space I have in between letters. Sometimes, it's just human error, right? Sometimes our spacing isn't consistent. Maybe your P is too close to the Y. Then you have to figure out, maybe then for one of the letters, you might need to reinforce it on the right side instead of the left side. What about you?
I also weirdly prefer the left a little bit more, but like you, I also take into consideration the spacing of the letters. I think it's because we are a little bit more experienced in writing the words. We have a natural tendency to do it the fixed width. And then later on, when you make it a little bit thicker, you have to adjust and then look at it visually, whether it's going to be balanced and whether it's going to be consistent. Having that thought as you draw the letters or as you write the letters makes it like a natural instinct whether to put it on the left or on the right or in the middle. Plus you have to naturally compensate for the space that you when you first thing. But of course that works when you're trying to do it in one shot. But if you had the option of doing it perfectly and you don't have to think about it later on, I feel like this is one of the pitfalls when you're more experienced in doing this, right? Because you can naturally adjust, you can technically wing it because you already know how thick or how big each letter is, so you can naturally adjust later on. But what's your tip for someone who's doing this for the first time?
This is a very good question. It struck me that I was actually explaining it from a seasoned practitioner's point of view, where we are able to create the entire word at one go. I would say for a beginner, there are 2 ways you can go about doing this. Tip here is, especially when you're doing full calligraphy, you want to give more space in between the letters, because don't forget, you're going to add lines to this later on. You can always write the entire word first, then perfect the spacing before you reinforce, or you can write each letter, reinforce it, then you go on to the next letter and reinforce it. That might be a little bit more time consuming, but I guess it makes it a lot more manageable, because you're tackling one letter at a time.
I think that's a great idea, Joyce. Making sure that each of the letter is perfect before you actually move on to the next letter is much simpler, I feel like. But how do you plan ahead to make sure that the whole word fits on the width that's available to you? For example, you're writing on a piece of paper. So when you write one letter at a time, how do you ensure that the word fits?
Alignment is one of the most tedious thing that you have to do when it comes to lettering and all calligraphy, actually. I think it's worth mentioning that most of our time creating a piece is dedicated to alignment. If you're writing with a marker, then you can always use a pencil to mark out the space that you allocate for each letter. You can always count how many letters there are in the words that you want to write. I don't normally like my words to go to hit the edge of the paper. So I'll usually mark out a frame that will give me like a nice empty border around the entire paper. So then after that, I start to divide that rectangle or that square that I have, divide it up into however many letters that I have to work with, factoring in the space as well. So for example, happy birthday, you have 2 words, count how many letters are there total, and then you add, one more box dedicated to that space in between happy and birthday.
I'm glad that you mentioned that, because it's one of the tips that I also usually give when lettering, is to make sure that the letters are fit nicely along shape that you are working with. So in this case, it's a rectangular shape that you need to fill the letters in. So that's one good way of actually blocking the space that's allotted for each letter. And it only goes to show that even when you're just doing faux calligraphy, there's a lot of thought process behind it. There's a lot of thinking involved in order to make sure that everything falls perfectly into place. So having said that, most of the people think that it's easy to do, but there's actually some skill that you need as well in order to accomplish that perfectly. There's a lot of thinking that goes behind into doing this as well. Even though it's faux calligraphy, it's fake calligraphy, it's not necessarily easier, right? Because you have to consider the spacing, you have to consider the alignment, like you mentioned, right? And this only goes to show that, especially for beginners, laying it out on a scratch or a scrap paper first before you commit to your final artwork will help you in the long term, because at least you're able to adjust the spacing perfectly before you do it on the final surface that you're going to be working on. So I feel like this is an important reminder, not just for calligraphers or letterers. In general, if you're working on a final artwork, you have to do a lot of sketches and drafts beforehand to ensure that everything is aligned where they should. So speaking of alignment, when you create faux calligraphy, does angle matter to you like it does for calligraphy? So I know from a copperplate perspective, most of the slants are consistent, right? 45 degrees to 60 degrees slant. Thereabouts. Does it matter for faux calligraphy?
Depends on how script accurate you want to be, right? When I teach modern calligraphy, I don't expect my participants to write in that 55, 56 degree slant as I would, because with modern calligraphy there really is no strict rule on that. You don't have to write at a specific angle. However, the angle still matters in terms of its consistency throughout all your letters. So if you're comfortable writing upright, then make sure that everything else is upright.
Yeah, so you would say it's more on the consistency of the angle as opposed to the angle itself. For me as well, I would tend to follow calligraphy rules. They're rules for a reason, because we know that they're going to look good that way. So I would tend to keep the slant consistent through when I draw my scripts. And what you said is right. I feel like it really depends on whether you want to be consistent with traditional scripts like copperplate and stencil. So unless you're trying to recreate that, you can have fun with your own script. Having written loads of these faux calligraphy scripts, what are the letters that you're most afraid of? What do you hate writing the most?
For me, the same regardless of what tool I'm using. So even if I'm doing calligraphy or faux calligraphy, I struggle with X and P. Everyone has letters that work for them and letters that don't.
I also don't like X because there's a weird you need to take note of, because
it's just 2 downstrokes.
It's just 2 downstrokes. You're right. It seems easy, but it's not, because you cannot be doing the cross at the middle because it won't look balanced. So you have to compensate for it a bit by moving the cross a little bit above the middle.
Yeah. So and I think that's what a lot of people don't realize. It's the sort of like the anatomy of the letter, right? So like you said, with X, we don't actually cut it right in the middle. We cut it a little bit on top, and then you need to balance out the thick and thin line. So maybe the easiest things are actually the hardest to create.
Yeah, like letter I. Like we mentioned that there are certain nuances to like letters like maybe, right? Is it important to learn calligraphy then before you dive into faux calligraphy?
Well, Faux calligraphy is one way to introduce yourself to the world of calligraphy. You can try it at home and all. And a lot of people that come to my courses actually say, they've actually tried to dabble with faux calligraphy, doodled a lot in school on their note, but somehow they don't know why this thing that they've drawn looks really good, and the other thing that they drew looks really bad. They can't really pinpoint what it is. So I do think that, after you've had a go at faux calligraphy on your own, it's worth exploring traditional calligraphy a little bit more, because a lot of rules that we use are actually based off, traditional scripts. You don't have to pick a specific script to master. The rules are pretty much the same things. Say, for an example, consistency in your spacing. So I do think that it's worth reading up more on. Maybe an easy one to read about is the copperplate script, also known as the English roundhand. I think that will be very helpful for you to continue. What do you think, Nate? Do you think people should dive a little bit deeper into lettering?
I'm totally with you on this. I feel like if people want to further their calligraphy and lettering skills, whether it's just faux calligraphy or any umbrella along those two major families, right? I feel like it's important to understand the beast that you're dealing with. How can you draw something that you don't understand? So I feel like if you understand it from a fundamental level, then it's easier for you to translate it into a drawing. Been thinking about it, like, how do painters paint people if they don't understand the shapes of people? In the same way, how can you draw the letters if you don't understand how the letters are formed? So if you want to do this professionally, I would suggest, highly, highly recommend that you attend calligraphy classes and lettering classes.
Oh yeah, definitely.
It will help you understand how letters are formed, and then you can apply your own personality into your work later on. As long as you understand what the basics are, you can bend the rules as you see fit.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Totally agree with you on that.
By learning the basics, it helps build the muscle memory too. And I feel like it's more important, specifically if you want to do faux calligraphy, because it all starts with the script itself, right? The monoline script. And then it's easier for you to make it thicker after you have mastered each of the strokes the way they should.
Yeah. Even if you don't want to do it professionally, even as a hobbyist, it's also worth taking a bit of time to study a traditional script, only because you become aware of why some of your faux calligraphy attempts don't look good. So when you know the why, you don't feel like, darn it, it just looks awful again and I can't correct it. Or even like going to Microsoft Word, they have copperplate script on it, right? If you type out A to Z and just looking at where the thick strokes are and whatnot, it gives you a better idea.
It's hard to pinpoint what you're missing if you don't know what you're missing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then you get frustrated.
Yeah, we've touched on a lot of stuff today. And I myself learned a lot from you. So I really want to thank
you
for doing this with me. Do you want to add anything more, any tips for faux calligraphy?
A lot of times, it's always the first step that's the hardest. If you feel that just the thought of creating calligraphy is difficult, it's always best to just start with a pencil.
Tell them where they can find you.
I live on Instagram. It's not difficult to find me at Artsynibs. You can find me on artsynibs.com as well. And I have a couple of resources on the website that you can download for free. And I've also, just like Nate, released a free ebook. Mine's all about chalk lettering and mine's all about modern calligraphy. So you can find all the details on artsynibs.com and also on Nate's website. So if you fancy a modern calligraphy course, you can also jump over to my website to have a look to see when is the next round of courses that's happening.
Yeah, so I will link all of those down in the description for you to take a look at. I'm sure you're going to learn a lot from her. To visit her website and all the things that she offers. So thank you, Joyce, for being on this call with me, and thank you for demystifying the whole faux calligraphy. Yeah, and then later on, I'll be showing you my process for doing chalk for calligraphy. Thank you for watching this week's video. I hope you learned everything you need to know about faux calligraphy. If there's anything else that you'd like to learn more about, do let me know down in the comments or tag us on Instagram and we'll be sure to answer them for you. Alright, thank you so much once again and see you again next time. Okay, I lost my train of thought. I'm just gonna edit this. Oh.
I'm just trusting you to edit every other blooper that I've made out.
Oh my God.